Hello, everyone. Hello. This is Irene with SaugaTalks. Hello. I speak weekly with fascinating people in tech, and we discuss emerging trends. We're discussing cool tech. We're discussing AR, VR, now Metaverse, AI, things that's changing our life as entrepreneurs, as technical people, as not technical people. It's basically we're all affected by all these new cool waves, and today I have a super guest with me, Simon Hodgkins. Simon, welcome.
Well, listen, it's great to be here. I'm delighted that we finally managed to get our calendars to align. But it's great. I love some of the previous talks that you've been doing. You've had some great people speaking on this, and I'm excited to get into the topics.
Simon, you are the right guest for the topic we announced, okay? MarTech. Lots of us hearing about dev tech, a lot of dev apps and other things that's helping developers in the life of 2022. But you are absolutely right person to talk about MarTech. How
Yeah,
marketeers feel these days with all the disruptive tech around us.
yeah, it is. And I'm sure if there are any people that have some marketing background, or if they touch on the marketing, because a lot of the departments that used to be siloed many years ago, now they overlap a lot. Products of marketing and sales. Everybody's talking to everybody, which is the right thing to do, of course. But we often talk about the tech stack, don't we? Or that we get into a real developer type conversation. And my background prior to my sort of marketing elements was very much in a technology field and a software field. So I understand a little bit about the complexities of the life of developing something from scratch and launching it and getting it out in the marketplace. But from a marketeer's perspective, there's a whole other side to this technical discussion, which is the marketing tech stack. And because all these cool entrepreneurs around the world are developing products and launching apps and new platforms, and there's such a choice out there for companies and for individuals to buy. Today, even the tools that we're using here, streaming live, there's lots of options. Okay, and we all have our own little preferences, and we all try different tools. But to get a successful marketing execution working and to reach your ideal customers with meaningful messages that they actually want to engage with, paying close attention to the technology is something that isn't just important anymore. It's a fundamental component of strategic marketing. You just can't do it without the right tech stack. And
Let's name those necessary elements, okay? What do we
yeah,
mean by MarTech?
yeah. So with marketing tech, let's start with the buzzwords, right? Let's start with things like metaverse and AI and VR. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I know your audience like the technical elements. But I'm going to bring it back to storytelling, if I can, for a moment. And when we talk about a tech stack and we say, well, what types of components, what kinds of tools do we need to use in order to engage from a storytelling perspective? And that's a very wide question. Years ago, we used to read books and maybe go to the movies and or watch something on a television set. Today, we've got channels coming at us like crazy, right? It's every type of streaming app on the planet is being pushed at us. We've got so much choice out there. But now there's been this new buzzword, hasn't there? This metaverse. So whether you buy into the Mark Zuckerberg metaverse, or whether you buy into the wider metaverse discussion, storytelling has been taking place in virtual environments for a long time. It just seems to be, to me, that the consumers are sort of catching up a little bit. If you look at the gaming world and the type of immersive games that people are playing and the storytelling that's been taking place in the gaming world, you could almost argue that the metaverse has been around for a long, long time. But now it's finding its way into retail. It's finding its way into buying and selling of goods. It's certainly finding its way in terms of currency and we can talk about crypto and decentralized finance, etc. Maybe a little bit later on. But the technology is changing at a rapid pace. It always does. Nothing stands still. So from a tech stack perspective, I want to sort of just bring that back down to, as I said earlier, the storytelling elements of it. Because ultimately, if you're marketing, you should be telling a story. And as human beings, we're actually hardwired to like stories. We can all remember stories from our childhood, and we can all remember stories from when we grew up and our experiences. We don't see the whole thing as a movie, but we remember the salient points of a story. And now the technology is an enabler in the tech stack to help us tell stories. So let's start at things like the metaverse. At the moment, as we know, we all put this big device on, right? And we all look into this thing. And inside this thing, it looks really cool. And the technology is improving all the time. For anybody else looking in, it looks a little bit strange, right? It's not the most beautiful things. And I'm sure as we go forward and we advance in technology, this thing will be built into frames and it will be in contact lenses, and we'll get very high tech on it in the future. But what's happening in there is a story. People are using avatars, they're creating their own personalities, they're interacting with people. And okay, maybe some of the graphics are a little bit clunky still, maybe it's not quite the way we wanted. But if I can go back just a little bit before I let you get a word in here, if I go back a little bit, I used to be prior to software, I used to be in telecommunications, and I can remember many years ago, BT Group back then had a futurist on staff full time just to look at future technologies. And I'm going back about 20 years, and we had almost like a real-time video conferencing facility. If you imagine this 2 decades ago, way before we even entered the pandemic, everybody got excited about Zoom and all the other tools that are out there. And we used to have this set up in demo labs with conferencing facilities and videos, and you could sit one side of a boardroom table, and on the opposite side were just a bank of video screens, and you could be with other directors from around BT Group around the world. And I'm going back about 20 years. So technology, now obviously they had an advantage, they were in that sort of space. But obviously technology takes a while for the adoption curve to kick in. But as marketers, if we think about the technology as an enabler to tell stories and to make meaningful, authentic, engaging communications, then I think it changes the story a little bit, because you become a little bit technology agnostic. And that marketing tech stack that we need, you have to make sure that you've got the right tool for the right job. And there's an ocean of choice at the moment. So the job of somebody to get that stack right, it's not easy, right?
It's becoming even more difficult. Okay, it sounds it's easy because what you describe is tremendous opportunity. Look at us, right? They're live streaming now, endless video content creation opportunities, right? Endless audio platforms now. Think about ClubHouse, think about Twitter Spaces and other things that marketers could not think about not long ago, right? How hard and how expensive it was to set up a webinar, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right? So all that is going away, the cost of entry lowering at the same time. If marketeers don't have a story to tell, technology is not going to help.
Yeah, exactly. So the trouble is, it's like if you go back to let's say Web 2.0, and we talk about social media platforms. That's kind of Web 2.0. It feels a little bit old now, and we're still doing roughly the same things on the main platforms. But when you talk about Web 3 and you start talking a bit about where the machines kick in and where you've got real-time 360-degree rendering happening in real time, that's a slightly different beast. Whereas a lot of these Web 2.0, they're quite flat. They're typically text-based. It's message-to-message type communication. Whereas our conversation here live, obviously for people watching the live stream or possibly watching this back on recording, it's a real conversation between two people happening in bits and bytes behind the scenes. But this is happening in a virtual environment now. So whether it's, I was on a call yesterday, you mentioned social audio. So I was on a Twitter space yesterday, and Jack Dorsey, who was the founder of Twitter, and he's gone off and Square, and he's big into crypto and all the rest of it. But he was speaking at it with a couple of people from Sequoia Capital, and there were there's about 7,200 people on that Twitter space. Now, you've only got to go back a few short months, and that technology stack wasn't as stable as it is today. You couldn't have 7,000 people on the stage in one go on a live audio call in a social audio environment. And prior to that, everybody was on ClubHouse, and Spotify got into the game a little bit. They launched a product called Green Room, where they purchased and sort of reassembled a company that used to be called Locker Room, which was a sporting type technology platform. But right now, it seems to be Twitter doing a lot of development. I know Clubhouse sort of gone down a little bit, and it's all sort of competing. We're still really to see what LinkedIn are going to do there. Of course, Microsoft are doing its thing with Microsoft Teams, and they're getting much more creative. But I think the exciting thing from a marketing tech stack and a disruptive technology perspective, which is really what we're talking about here today, it's the tip of the iceberg. We're just scratching the surface of what we're going to be able to do here. And people will argue, won't they? And I'm sure people who've been on this show have talked in the past that the pandemic has done nothing but speed up the requirements for the technology. But I would argue that we were kind of heading down this road before the pandemic anyway. Yes, it's speeded up, but I honestly don't think we've seen anything yet, because some of the stuff that's coming down the line, and a lot of the big technology players aren't even in the end user space at the moment. They're still holding back. There's an awful lot of technology, both from a software and a hardware, a physical product environment, still to be released, and that's very very exciting. But it adds back to the complexity. It adds back to the marketing tech stack challenge that everybody's facing. And of course, who wins in that environment? Typically, the larger brands. Depending on if you're a single business or you're working on your own, you might have some kind of cost consideration. If you're a larger brand with larger budgets, you're probably going to go with the larger brand type solutions, because you're buying a level of proficiency, customer support, back-end technical capabilities, and you want a product that can scale with you, because you can't keep swapping out your tech stack every 5 minutes. You have to give something a period of time to make sure that you're using it correctly, that all your people are trained correctly on it, etc. So how's that for an opening sort of discussion? Does that sort of get us going in terms of the right
This is
direction?
perfect. This is perfect, Simon. So why don't we talk about big elephant in the room? Okay, AI. Will it automate marketing very soon? Will marketeers be aware of what's happening? Because a lot of still very manual tasks out there in day of the marketeer today.
Yeah, and I think it's the right question, but it's a little bit like, does it get rid of truck drivers? Does it get rid of,
Yeah.
where does AI start and stop? And I think the best answer I've heard to that question is that it takes over the repetitive, highly codable tasks that can be done using robotics at a physical level and AI at a computing level. So if you can get the machines to learn, and we all see the programs and they're getting better, and some I've seen everything from movies to books to scripts being written by AI from start to finish, and some of them are okay, some of them are absolutely terrible. But you've also got to train these AI engines. You've also got to train them. So the machines need to learn, and they're only as good as the data that we put into them. Because it's the old, whatever you put in, you'll probably get out, and then it learns, it applies, and it changes over time. But the original data, where you start training some of these engines and some of these technologies, It's all coming from the world of humans. So if you've got people working in AI, let's say in a lab in California somewhere, and they're all of a certain demographic and a certain age and a certain profile, you could argue that there's already some bias being put into the way that's being set up. And that's a whole other discussion point when it comes to the technology side of things and how products and services, everything from AI down to the latest app you put on your phone, is being developed. And the world today is a lot more inclusive. We're all talking about diversity and inclusion, as we should be. And we're all talking about the environment and the impact that it has. And if I can maybe just jump a little bit back over to the cryptocurrency type world.
Please do, Simon.
Everybody's heard the discussion about all this computing power. And I suppose the banking system today uses computing power. It uses energy. You could argue maybe a fraction of the cost compared to mining coins. But that technology is improving too, and it will get better and more efficient and more sustainable as time moves forward. And it's no different to AI. The AI is getting better and better all the time. I heard recently, and I don't know if this is true, so please, if you're watching this, check it. But I heard recently that the last time a chess grand champion actually managed to beat a computer was about, I think it was about 12 years ago, but I'd stand to be corrected. Somebody might say, oh no, sure, a human beat it 5 years ago. I don't follow chess as closely as I used to. But it just makes you realize that the machines are doing things much faster. Onto your question, how does that impact people like me? I'm actually looking forward to it, because I think if we can get the humans in this world of work and this world of change to focus on the higher level tasks, the more professional tasks that require that human balance and judgment and guidance and emotion, I think that's very hard for the machines still at this point to even grasp. They can try and mimic certain things that we teach them, but it's very hard to have the human feeling and elements running through. And I think in a nutshell, what I'm saying here when it comes to AI, and in the relationship to jobs, yes, it's going to disrupt a lot of jobs, but it's also going to create a lot of jobs too. And it's also hopefully going to move us onto a more meaningful playing field where we don't have to do a lot of the monotonous, heavy lifting tasks that we have to do today. Are there huge impacts for society there? Yes. Do you get dragged into a conversation about universal social income? Yes. Do you get into, what's the future of work and what are the job titles of tomorrow? Well, I know my children, the type of jobs that they're looking at today didn't exist when I left college. The job titles are very different. And I don't think that ever changes. I think every generation, I think it changes and will continue to change. But I don't want to underestimate or leave anybody with the impression that I'm not sensitive to the issues this can also cause. You've only got to look at some of the major cities around the world, and there's a very strong divide being driven by technology between people that can afford to live in the city and people that can't afford to live in the city. And all the big tech companies want people to come and work for them in these big glass shiny towers, or at least they did before the pandemic. But it's very hard because it's quite expensive to live in a major city where all these big companies tend to migrate to. And I think the benefits of, we're jumping over a lot of topics here, I know, but the benefits of being connected like this, we're in a different country, yet we're talking live and streaming today due to the benefits of computing and the internet. I think that's going to have a fundamental change on the way we're working. And I think a lot of us think we've changed now, and some people are going back into the office and can't wait, and some people are working in a hybrid environment. But that is all to be disrupted even further than we think today, whether there's a pandemic or not. The disruption is continuing to come down the tracks, and you don't really hear that very often. People think, oh, okay, well, it's getting better and the masks have been lifted in my area and we're vaccinated, or we'll be okay, or we can all go out again to restaurants and socialize, or as is at the time of recording this, Hong Kong's all back down, locking down again. So depends where you are on the planet. But the technology doesn't care. The technology continues to advance. And if you look at the stock market, you think about disruption. If you'd have said to me at the start of the pandemic, which we're 2 years into at this stage, that technology would have advanced as fast as it did, and the revenues that these large technology players have driven, and the growth that we've seen in the technology space during a global pandemic, it's been nothing but phenomenal. I know a lot of industries have suffered. I know a lot of small businesses have suffered. And hopefully certain governments and certain jurisdictions are trying to help there as best they can. But technology is, it's not going anywhere. It's only going to get more and more disruptive. It's only going to speed up more and more. AI, machine learning, machine translation, obviously we're speaking in English because I don't speak your language. But there's a whole world of international language when it comes to how fast the machines can help us interpret things in real time, and how we can share content. I'm not sure how often you are reading native Japanese or Chinese content. I'm guessing not very often, because we probably don't speak the language. And the same is true for the largest population in the world. If you look at Asia compared to, say, people where maybe English is their first language, that's a whole technology disconnect that we see going on. But the technology will solve that. And that's kind of bringing it back full circle to this storytelling. At the moment, we're still only storytelling to certain segments of the planet, unless we're using things like localization and translation and transcreation and helping brands resonate their stories in a different language. And there's about 2,500 languages on the planet, and some die off each year, and new languages change a little bit as new words come into various languages around the world.
And even languages, Simon, they're not longer separating people as much as it used to. Look at TikTok.
It's not, but okay? I do think that well, at least in my world, which because I speak English as a first language, I'd say the vast majority of my conversations are in English. Now that's partly because my ability to speak other languages is okay in some areas and really terrible in others. But then that's very different. If you go to a different part of the world, that's not the case. It's not in English. So it depends on how fast the technology solves this problem. But I do find that for people that are connecting around the world, you agree on the language first. The machine in between you and I isn't allowing me to do this not in English. Right?
You know what? We can talk all day, right, about things that we see around us. I wanted to infuse the point that new generation grew up already. They don't understand a lot of challenges that we faced and still facing. They are conversing in TikTok, in sign language, okay? They are doing dance language. They are doing fabulous work creating that content. Have you seen some of the things when in 20 seconds you get the whole story? This is human creativity. This is human message out there. It makes your life different, don't you think?
It is, and you talk about technology, and if you look at now, if you put aside for a minute some of the conversations around the parent company of TikTok and where data's held, and you put all that conversation aside for a moment, if you look at the way the algorithm is performing on TikTok, it is a masterful strategy. You can open the TikTok app today, and you can lose an hour. Just it is so addictive as a technology. I think they're acing it, But you could say the same with things like Snapchat. You could say, they've all got their sort of corners that they're playing out in. But you're right. If you go back to Web 1.0, Web 2.0, we were talking about emojis on mobile phones, and today it's a real-time, real-life, genuine video message that's conveying it, and sometimes words aren't required, and it depends on the topic, right? If you're trying to tell a story about a particularly complex say, business discussion, then sometimes a 20-second TikTok video probably isn't going to cut it. But if you're trying to get across a feeling, and you look at some of the global sports brands that do this really, really well, you can get across a feeling very, very effectively. We've just gone through the Super Bowl at this time of recording. The advertising spots for the Super Bowl are astronomically priced, but you've only got to look at things like Coinbase, who spent quite a lot of money on their Super Bowl ad. And the amount of people that just went within a 60-second period, just went automatically, picked up their phone and went to the company's website, which took the whole thing down. I mean, it was incredible. And that was old school advertising, but it was playing into a new app and a new.
Very much so, with some of the humor, that appeals to all generations. So going back to storytelling, when you're funny, when you're talking to people's hearts rather their rational minds, right? This is where you get the response. Mm-hmm.
And we're emotional creatures. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? If you can talk to my heart, it'll probably affect me more than if you just talk to my logical side. My emotional side will probably win out, not all the time, but there's a difference here between genuine, authentic stories and having a genuine story to tell and something that's helpful to an environment, and the opposite side of that coin, which is manipulation. And unfortunately, a lot of the tech stack today can be used for the wrong purposes, and we've got lots of examples of that we don't need to go into. And there's a big job to be done. And marketing tech stack, which again, coming back to the topic, that's a big challenge, because when you talk about things like ad fraud or brand safety, and when you talk about the impact of how you're perceived on the internet, you get into this world of user-generated content. We've had various platforms deciding whether you can thumbs down something anymore or whether you can like something anymore. You've got major brands not turning their comments on YouTube because they just get absolutely hammered every time. And, even the biggest technology players in the world, their answer to a lot of this, when pushed by various governments, is, yeah, we'll just hire thousands of people to manually check this. So that's what's happening. I mean, that's the reality. They have to build literally offices full of people to go and check all this stuff and weed it all out, because the machines are doing a certain level, but they're not catching it all, because humans are smart and they know how to get around the way the machines think. For now, that may change over time.
For now. So on that journey, Simon, in 2022, what kind of takeaways we should provide to our listeners, in the way that if you're in a marketing job, if you are in business job, right? If you're really in sales or just talking to customers, all that universe, all right? What kind of marketing stack, I would say, critical points we should be looking?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's try and bring this home then. So in terms of the actual stack, some of the tools that you need in your stack is, you need to think about a home for your content. Now, people say, oh yeah, of course, yeah. But then it becomes a mixture of, a thumbnail drive, a hard drive, the laptop that you're working on, the company set up some kind of shared server system. And then you think about all the different ways, whether it's Box or Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever technology you're using. But I'm not really talking about that at all. From a tech stack perspective in the world of business, you need a central repository for all of your content. And people need to start thinking about their content as more than just a cost center, because it's actually the lifeblood of an organization and the lifeblood of a business. The words that you use, the videos that you use, and the audio that you use can help to inspire people and engage them more than you actually keep thinking about today. So having a central repository, and you can spend hundreds of thousands on off-the-shelf models, you can spend millions on bespoke models for this, or you can get a pay-as-you-go type service. But think about it, digital asset management would be the tech stack term. So think about the DAM. Think about the digital asset management tool that you're going to use, where you're going to prepare, keep, and reuse, repurpose and edit all this fantastic content that you've got, because it's not just about producing one piece of content anymore and then it disappears into a server. It's about how do you repurpose and reuse that content? How do you use the various editing tools to cut that content into snackable pieces that you can reuse, resurface, and engage with? And all that needs to live within some kind of a digital asset management tool. So that's the first thing I'd say. Think about your content maybe a little bit different if you weren't thinking about it in those terms today. It's fundamentally fuel for your business that needs to be carefully handled and updated regularly. So that's the first thing. The next thing you need to think about is how the tools that you use to engage. So in terms of tech stack, whether you're using an email marketing platform, and there's lots of choices out there. I'm sure we can put some links maybe on this video to where people can find them. But there's lots. You've only got to put a search into Google for email marketing tools. There's tons of them. Some of the major brands I think are certainly worth considering. However, I would also talk about marketing automation software tools. And there's a fundamental difference between email marketing tools and marketing automation tools. Whereas email marketing, you're kind of sending the message out and people are receiving it. Hopefully they're not unsubscribing. They're remaining, readers of the information that you're sending. But marketing automation is a lot more than that. It closes this 360-degree loop. So when somebody gets something, you know when they've opened it, you know where they've seen it. If they visit your website, you know exactly where they're coming from. You can see what pages they're on. You can see how long they're standing on your pages. All those kind of marketing basic statistics, which ultimately feed back to your marketing team in the world of business, who can then think about the customer journey. You can think about how a customer comes through that, from the beginning of an awareness funnel down to becoming a valued customer or a repeat customer over time. And that's kind of almost industry agnostic. It's kind of something you just need to do almost regardless of the business that you're in. The other thing that I would mention as well is content production tools. So in the tech stack today, there's lots of online tools available now where you can drop in various elements, and the machine, the AI, will actually pull it all together for you. And that happens both in video and written and audio type words. However, you're going to need some proficiency in some of the higher end editing tools. And some of the editing tools that are available to business today from companies like Adobe and all the technologies that they're deploying, it's the kind of stuff that, the movie studios were using only a few short years ago, and now it's available in everybody's home office. So there's a lot of high quality tools that are available to it, but you also have to be proficient. You have to make sure you're hiring the right people that know how to use this type of information. So there we've talked about digital asset management as part of the tech stack. We've talked a little bit about email marketing and marketing automation software. And we're also talking a little bit now about the tools that you need in terms of content production. And that could be everything from video production through to producing podcasts or shows like this. It takes back end. Everybody thinks it's easy, but it's what happens before and after the camera goes on that's where a lot of the heavy lifting is involved. So there's three basic elements, because I know we're up against the clock here, but there are three sort of really important tech stack items that come into the world of marketing and business as per your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon, so very much. I enjoyed our conversation. We talked about inspiring, shiny toys out there, right? Everyone is aware of, but we're still figuring out, right? What makes sense for our brands, what makes sense for our companies and our customers, right? At the same time, exactly, the variety of choices. Hey, it makes us all human, right? Making choices based on rational inputs and some emotions too. Simon, thank you. Thank you so very much.
Well, look, if I can just leave one last thought, which is important for everybody. I often use the word think global. I use that term a lot. And, I just want to maybe just take a moment just to really help people to really just pause on that term for a moment. If you think global, it helps everything. It helps society. It helps sustainability. It also helps your local environment. If you think globally, and this ability to reach out around the world now, it's just such an exciting proposition that's available to all of us. I know a lot of people say that, but it is an incredible time that we live in. So I'm really excited about the next few years, and I think it's just going to get better. We're going to have challenges, but there's an awful lot of positive news and developments to come. So I hope that's useful.
Thank you. Loving it. Thank you so much for sharing the insights,
My pleasure.
your experiences, and your expertise with us. Thank you.
My pleasure.